Dead Space is my favorite horror game of all time. I don't say this for clickbait. I quite literally mean and must reiterate that Dead Space is my favorite horror game of all time. And after replaying it 12 years later, I think I know why. Dead Space is a survival horror game that released in 2008 by Visceral Games. I knew nothing about Dead Space, and to be quite honest, I wasn't a huge fan of horror in any capacities. Movies, Halloween, haunted houses, so why did I love the game so much? Well, a friend from high school invited me over saying he had this new game for me to try out and that he wanted to watch me play it. So I did. I went over, popped in the game, and was not so subtly greeted by the game's menu, which immediately told me everything I was in for. Dreadfully, I pressed play. You play as Isaac Clarke, an engineer that's come to fix the Ishimura only for him and his team to realize that there's more to the Ishimura than a broken relay to fix, and the residents aren't too friendly about your arrival. You and your crew are attacked, and you're separated as you sprint to safety, and you pick up your first tool/weapon and begin doing things engineers do best.
You fix the tram.
Isaac, get to the medical deck and find that rig as fast as you can.
Get in there and find the comms control station.
Get some thermite.
Maybe you can dump them into that gravity beam with your kinesis gun.
There's a cargo loading lift there you can use to deliver the marker up to the hangar.
Make us whole.
As I played through the first few chapters on the hardest difficulty, because I love beating my head against a wall, I carefully turned every corner and reacted on fear instead of skill, missing shots I could have easily hit, but didn't because, oh god, Jesus fucking Christ. Towards the mid-game, while still being scared, I got better managing that raw emotion of fear, and at the end of the game, I wasn't Isaac the engineer, I was Isaac the badass marker killer, which brings me to my first explanation of why this game is my favorite horror game of all time. It lives by a motto that forces you to get good if you want to have any hope of beating it on the hardest difficulty, and that is to conquer your fear and focus your fire. And that statement alone is the prime reason this game is so damn good. In the beginning, you're in a panic. You miss a shot, and now a necromorph is sprinting towards you. Still scared, you fire off a few more shots, but you hit it in the head or the body. Finally, the necromorph falls over dead. But now you're nearly out of ammo. What will you do for your next encounter? Well, you better figure it out, because
I got word of a settlement that needs our help.
Before we go any further, if you like what I've said so far, you should stop watching and play this game for yourself, as I would be spoiling a mass majority of the content in this game and what makes the game so special. Additionally, if you like this video and wish to discuss it with me and other future games I plan to review, you can find me on Twitch, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday starting at 10:30 p.m. Central. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the games I'm reviewing, have reviewed, or going to review, and I look forward to seeing you there. Let's get back to the review. Dead Space's horror is generated through the use of two methods, atmosphere/environment, and loud music and noise combined with grotesque visuals, unfortunately producing jump scares. The jump scares are a sad implementation, as it cheapens the rest of the experience that Dead Space has to offer, so it's a really good thing that the atmosphere and environment carries this game through that cheap experience, because this is where Dead Space shines. Walking through every corridor and narrow hallways with nothing happening, but knowing at any moment there could be a threat, messes with you in a way that I loved. You can be walking in a hallway, or hear something climbing an event above you, which is the necromorph's main source of travel and spawning, or maybe something will pop out and come for you, and maybe not, and that's what constantly keeps you on edge. The bloodied walls and dead corpses help fill you with a sense of fear and dread, especially when those bodies can become the very things you're fighting off, so now corpses are potential threats too. The team designing this game took so much effort into adding small details like writing on the walls from crew members that went insane to literal medical imaging of necromorphs. They've also taken into great consideration how valuable it is, especially in horror games, to immerse you in its world. So much so that the entire game menu is always managed in real time. Need to manage your inventory? Sure, go ahead, just know that Isaac is still vulnerable. Want to read a text log? Sure, go ahead, just make sure you're safe because Isaac can still be attacked. Audio logs and video footage are all played from the suit to help keep you immersed in the world instead of messing around with pause menus. Oxygen, health, stasis, objectives, your map, and more are all monitored by your suit, and it's a creative way to keep you on the Ishimura mentally as a player, and that does a great deal to aid in the game's horror. The background music when Isaac is walking around is the perfect amount of creepy, but not overbearing, and can add to the experience. However, the music played during combat is loud and over the top, and can cause your ears to bleed. This game has peak moments that I think would be ruined if the music was consistently played. Like in the medical bay, for example, they stop all music and it's just Isaac in a big ass room with a few friends hiding in the vents waiting. This was probably one of the scariest places for me to play through, as I was listening so intently for any movement in the vents to give away a necromorph so that I could be prepared.
Hazardous anomaly detected.
The sound design is genius in this regard, and creating a space where I don't know if there's a legitimate threat or if that's just my head playing with me. And that's all generated through the atmosphere and the environment. To add to the sound design, as you progress through the game, Isaac starts to hear whispering and voices, not the player. This isn't an added-on effect to specifically scare you, it's Isaac going crazy, and it adds to the tension on top of everything that's already built. The jump scares, however, pull down this experience slightly. Anytime you get into combat with the necromorph, the game turns the volume to max. Loud, stressful music plays, the necromorphs start yelling at you, and your ears begin to bleed as you have your heart attack. As I was playing, there was times when I knew without a shadow of a doubt that a necromorph was going to come from a specific vent, but when it jumps out of the vent, I'm still scared. And the reason I do is because the necromorph's actions are so violent and aggressive with music to match, and the volume cranked to maximum overdrive, you simply can't help it, and those moments just feel cheap. I wasn't scared, I was startled. I'm more terrified of this game when everything is quiet, and I'm so focused on waiting for the next threat. I do like how the necromorphs travel and spawn using the vents. I just wish I didn't have to make that appointment with my audiologist next week for the hearing loss this game gave me. The necromorphs jumping out to attack aren't the worst scares Dead Space has to offer in terms of quality. Sometimes the game will throw a quick go fuck yourself scare right at you, and afterwards you're just left feeling cheated. Like that. You mean to tell me that door only slams that hard when I'm about to go through it? This game would be much better off without them. Let's move on to the gameplay, which breaks away from the traditional shooter by asking players to shoot at a precise part of the enemy, specifically the limbs, making for interesting encounters, and the game gives you a bunch of tools tailored for this new and interesting mechanic. Starting off with the plasma cutter, each weapon has two firing methods. The plasma cutter changes from a 3-fire spread vertically to horizontally, which fits the game's enemies perfectly. The pulse rifle is your standard shoot-'em-up gun, with a firing mode that makes you wonder why it was invented prior to the necromorph infestation. I mean, wouldn't that hit everyone else around you at, like, head height? You have a line gun, which fires, well, a projectile on a line, but it also lays down mines that trigger after a short amount of time or if something runs over them. The contact beam is a precise weapon with high damage output, with an alternate firing method that pushes and damages enemies around you. Then there's the flamethrower, which produces flames as a projectile at a consistent rate or by shooting it out as a burst with the secondary firing method. The force gun releases a burst of energy in a short range in front of you and is effectively this game's version of a shotgun, with a secondary fire that creates mines on the ground. Lastly, the Ripper is a rotary saw that you can use to cut off the limbs of a monster, with a secondary fire that's garbage, considering this weapon's damage is based on how long it's in contact with the enemy, and the alternate fire makes the saw a projectile and therefore a waste of ammo. Nearly all of these weapons and their firing modes are satisfying and fun to use. In terms of utility, the game gives you two more tools at your disposal, Stasis and Kinesis. Stasis, being the more valuable of the two, slows enemies way down, allowing for you to get more precise shots to save on ammo. It's also noteworthy to mention that the stasis packs fill up your whole stasis meter, so upgrading the capacity of your stasis at a workbench makes the stasis packs that more valuable to you. On the other side of the spectrum, Kinesis can grab objects and pull them to you, but it can also push them away. You can use this to your advantage to grab enemies' sharp limbs and use them against their brethren, though I think this is more viable and useful in the sequel when you upgrade the damage of this. The game, as stated before, adds a different twist on killing enemies by making the players focus on dismembering the limbs, which not only creates a unique way to kill things, but it also allows for the developers to get creative with their weapon design, which I think is one of Dead Space's major strengths. The game has a good variety of necromorphs and 3 major boss fights. Of the different kinds of enemies, the most common are the slashers, which are the fodder of Dead Space that can quickly overwhelm the player when multiple slashers attack at once. Leapers who, and you'll never guess this, leap at you in order to dig their teeth and tail-like spear into your flesh. These necromorphs are typically found in zero-gravity conditions where they excel, but they are also two-handed speed demons if gravity is active. Lurkers, which are babies that shoot projectiles at you, or stab you in the face, whatever they feel like doing that day. And lastly, infectors, whose whole job it is to reproduce more necromorphs. However, not only do they create new ones, they turn it into an upgraded slasher who doesn't give a shit what you're shooting at it. The other necromorphs, while just as interesting, are just not seen as much throughout the game. There is one more enemy that can create a special tension later in the game, called the Hunter. The Hunter is an awesome addition to the roster, as this thing cannot die, at least not by traditional means. To deal with this enemy, you usually have to do some crowd control of both him and the surrounding enemies in the environment. Shoot his legs, throw some stasis on him, clear the room, stasis him again, and then get the hell out of there. Every time I play this game, I dread this part, but it's a good kind of dread. The Hunter keeps you on your toes. The main bosses are thematically and visually amazing. The 3 that stand out to me as boss fights are the Leviathan, this thing, and the hive mind. There are many bosses, but which ones you would include into that group are up for debate. All of the main bosses are amazing to look at and match the expectation the game builds up to. However, I've never been a huge fan of shoot this obvious weak spot. It devalues the threat the boss should be imposing on the player. The hive mind really does make Isaac feel like he's up against the odds, but as a player, I just wish there was something more to the fight. Then there's the turret boss fight, which just got repetitive and boring to me after a while. Maybe I'm in the minority with that thought. And then there's the Leviathan again, which lives up to the hype thematically, but in terms of gameplay, it's just shoot the big yellow thing till it dies. But hey, at least it looks menacing. The next major function of gameplay in Dead Space is your upgrades. Upgrading in Dead Space is pretty straightforward. As you progress through the game, you will find power nodes on the walls, which can be used to upgrade your weapons, health, oxygen, stasis, or kinesis. Sometimes these power nodes can be used to access special areas that contain massive amounts of ammo and other goodies Isaac can use. As far as I can tell, you can always make a profit more than what you lose from them. Most weapons have an initial stat increase and then require you to make further commitment, because some of the power nodes you use net you no gain. This encourages the user to use different type of weapons in the early game until you're ready to commit to your upgrades mid to late game. Health upgrades cause you to commit 3 power nodes for a 25% health increase. This may seem like an appealing offer at first until you realize that death doesn't matter. There's no true point in upgrading your health when the only punishment you receive is to redo the fight you just lost to. To some degree, I wish it was a bit more punishing so the health upgrade looks more appealing. I feel similarly about the air upgrade, as you do not need to upgrade it once to complete the game. I feel they could have alleviated the uselessness of the air upgrade by adding hidden areas in the game you couldn't get to without A. Upgrading your air, or B. Spending money to maintain air packs for Isaac to get to those locations without dying. This seems like a useless upgrade and not worth committing to. Use your credits for something else. Speaking of credits, this is the other way you can get power nodes for your suit and your weapons. Selling different ammo than the weapons that you are currently using, or you just have an abundance of because you were careful with your shooting, is a great way of rewarding the players with the conquer your fear and focus your fire mentality. Less ammo spent on fighting means more ammo to sell for upgrades for your weapons, and if you spec your upgrades into damage, that's even less ammo used, giving you more credits to spend on power nodes to upgrade your stasis so you can slow your enemies down, focus your shots, and spend less ammo so you can... I think you see where I'm getting with the progression loop by now. I think it's a fantastic system and it ties into the difficulty well. At higher levels of difficulty, enemies take more damage to kill and you take less hits to die. In addition to this system, enemies have a lower chance to drop items and gear, making every shot you fire that much more punishable if you miss. The last thing for me to discuss is the story. I also feel compelled to say that I think Isaac, given how involved he is with the story, that making him a silent protagonist was the wrong choice. I understand the developer wanted him to have little interference and to thin the barrier between player and player character, but you can't have your cake and eat it too, and it just leaves the player with a, oh yeah, that's not me vibe, when Isaac does have some sort of response to the story or the moment. On the other side of it, when Isaac has an opportunity to speak, and probably should, he doesn't because again, the developers want to try and blur that barrier to pull you further into the game's atmosphere. It fails to do that for me. The sequel did it best by giving him a voice and allowing him to speak with the other characters in the game, and while they set that boundary that this is Isaac and you are playing as him, it thankfully didn't affect the horror aspect for me, but it did enhance the story quite a bit. But that's enough of the sequel. I'll be going over the story of Dead Space. If you want to avoid spoilers, click to here. Alright, let's begin. Starting off with what happened before Isaac and his crew arrive. Through audio logs and text logs, we learn the story of what happened aboard the USG Ishimura. Earth is running low on resources, dangerously low. So the CEC was created to go to other planets and harvest their minerals to replenish Earth's. This process is called planet cracking. In Aegis 7, the planet we happen to come upon during the intro, is planet number 36. The USG Ishimura was the pride of the CEC and was seen as a saving grace by humanity as it supplied mankind with the minerals needed to survive. Great, right? Well, not so much, because it doesn't seem mankind can escape its inevitable fate, and the crew of the Ishimura uncovered something on Aegis 7, the red marker. A marker is an alien relic that affects the genetic code of organic tissue and turns the tissue into these things called necromorphs. The marker, however, only converts the organic tissue after the life on the planet reaches a certain point in their evolutionary process. And guess what? Humanity reached that point. This marker influences the mind of those within a close proximity to itself, causing paranoia, mass hysteria, suicidal thoughts, and psychopathic behavior.
It's the conviction of a true believer! They're ready. Take him!
The signal that the marker is sending to people on this ship and the colony located on Aegis 7 is causing people to kill each other and themselves. The more time exposed to the marker, the crazier you become. Additionally, some people like Isaac can resist this influence more than others due to their intellect. It's also important to mention that the signal that the markers give off are actually instructions for those influenced by the marker to build more markers. This whole mining operation is extremely illegal, as Aegis 7 is located on a marked-off area made by EarthGov.
Captain's log. Personal. I want to set the record straight. By the time this log is heard, my actions will have been vindicated. I'm a unitologist. By now, it's probably no secret that we shouldn't be in this star system. Just another illegal mining job for the company. That is until the colony found the marker.
This area is marked off due to the experiments that were conducted by EarthGov on this man-made red marker. That's right, there's another marker just like it back at home called the black marker, and we copied it. This black marker found on Earth produces limitless amounts of energy, which led to a bunch of people to start worshipping it and creating the religion of unitology. But it also influenced the scientists who were studying it to go and build a copy of the marker, proceeding to conduct experiments on Aegis 7 with this new marker. Needless to say, the experiments didn't quite go so well, and the government gon' do what the government gon' do and hid it from the general population.
The government isn't going to cover this one up.
Fast forward to the events on the ship. The captain of the Ishimura, Captain Mathis, also a unitologist, believed this marker was a holy relic and makes it his goal to get this marker aboard the ship. Captain Mathis believed everything that was happening on the planet's surface, the mass murder and suicide, was God's work, and that he was going to retrieve this red marker at any costs.
What in God's name is going on down there?
I think that's precisely the point, Doctor. God's work.
After all, that's the real reason the CEC came here, to obtain that marker. Dr. Kine, also a unitologist who questioned the legitimacy of his religion after bearing witness to the events of the colony, eventually turned on Captain Mathis and attempted to relieve him of his duties. And, well, he did, just probably a little bit longer than Mathis would have liked.
By Maritime Law, Article 5469, I hereby declare Captain Benjamin Matthias unfit for duty.
Unfortunately, the captain had already succeeded in getting the marker aboard the ship, and with that came the mass hysteria, the murder, and the suicides, eventually leading to what you've been seeing on the screen. In a last-ditch effort to save the few remaining crew members, a distress call was sent out to the CEC, who then dispatched the USG Kellyan to go aid the Ishimura. Enter Isaac and the boys. Isaac is an engineer that has boarded the USG Kellyan en route to fix the USG Ishimura, with his primary goal to visit his girlfriend Nicole at some point during his trip, who happens to be one of the medical officers there. You run into trouble almost immediately, and your ship ends up colliding with the USG Ishimura, putting the USG Kellyan out of commission. Not moments later, you and the crew realize that just maybe, there's something more concerning on the USG Ishimura than just a
busted array like we thought.
You get separated from your team and begin fixing things as Hammond and Kendra come up with a plan to get the ship working again. Hammond, after a few repairs later, finally realizes how severe the situation is and decides to give up on his mission to fix the ship, and then tries to come up with a plan to get home.
Mission failed. We'll get him next time.
With him dead, it's just you, Kendra, and Dr. Kine, who has somehow still managed to stay alive, and convinces Isaac the only way to save mankind is to send the marker back down to Aegis 7. Just as you get ready to do that, Kendra, who's been distrusting of Hammond this whole time, turns out to be another nutty unitologist, and shoots Dr. Kine dead just before you get on the shuttle. With no one to turn to anymore, Isaac finds some sort of guidance through his girlfriend Nicole.
Isaac, Nicole, I need you to help me. Help us. Now! I'm in the flight control room. Please, Isaac, hurry! Please! I love you.
Who helps him pull the shuttle Kendra stole back and send her out into the space via an escape pod. Periodically, you see Nicole, but right away you can tell something is off about her. Maybe it's because she's been dead the entire time and died from suicide on the ship, which is revealed to Isaac by Kendra as she begins to take the marker back to her ship again.
See? Here and safe. Just like Khan. Just like the captain. Nicole has been dead this whole time.
Isaac has his moment of realization, and then he's left with the only other goal he can think of: destroy the marker by crashing it into the planet like Dr. Kine said. When he makes his way back to the shuttle, Kendra gets squished, Isaac kills the big bad slug, then he gets on the ship to watch a giant chunk of the planet crash into the marker, destroying it. The game ends with one more go fuck yourself scare, and then the credits roll. As far as the story goes, I've seen some people call it generic and predictable. However, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't fascinated by the game's lore, especially given that the sequels provide satisfying answers to all the questions the first game leaves you with. I wouldn't call the story generic. I personally think it's different and enjoyable. That's not to say the story doesn't have its faults or that the characters are perfect. For example, Hammond should have immediately left the moment he saw just one necromorph slice open two of his interns instead of finishing the mission. Kendra could stop being annoying, and Isaac should probably speak for himself every once in a while. I've seen other people critique this game for the way it railroads players, but as a whole I really enjoyed the story, and it gets even more interesting when you really start to look up some of the questions, because the community of Dead Space has done a great job of fitting all the pieces of the puzzle together to finally see the whole picture. Even with the flaws mentioned in the video, Dead Space gets way more right than it does wrong, and it's sad to know we will never see the release of Dead Space 4. This game created a memory within me that I cherish, and I think it does that for many people who have played this game. And it's for that reason, and many others that I've previously mentioned in the video, that I can say with affirmation, even after 12 years later, that Dead Space is still my favorite horror game of all time. Thank you for watching, especially if you made it to the end. This is my first ever video and the first time using software to edit, so it was very experimental, and I hope you enjoyed the content I provided. I also understand the value of constructive criticism and ask that if you see an area that you think really needed some work or an implementation that would add to the enjoyable experience of this review/critique, then please let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or come visit me on Twitch. I look forward to speaking with you. And once again, thank you so much for watching.